In this lesson, we're going to show you how to use your calculator, your TI-84, to evaluate a derivative. And I don't think I have to convince you that this will be useful to you. So this will allow you to tackle kind of ugly derivatives like we see in this question here. Although you do know how to solve this one by hand, we want to avoid that if we can, right? Especially in the AP exam, you want to save time and work efficiently. So being able to evaluate this derivative at x equals 2 on your calculator is going to save you time versus doing power rule and then chain rule here. And they can actually get nastier than this. I could have I don't know, a logarithm inside the sign or something like that to make it to the point where it would be really hard to solve by hand accurately. Okay. This is super useful also in our related rates problems where we have sort of real life functions, because those often don't come out as nice little polynomial functions, right? You've seen them before. Okay, so this is actually pretty easy. The first thing we're going to do, though, to make sure everybody's on the same page is, you already know about this, I think. So we're going to make sure that our calculator is on radians mode. So we want to be in radians, not degrees. Remember, these are just two different units of measuring angles. The entire AP Calc exam is all in radians. There's no point in the AP Calc exam where you're going to give an answer in degrees, so you don't have to worry about what mode you're on as long as you set it up ahead of time. I've read that this is not true for AP Physics, so if you're also an AP Physics student, you may want to pay closer attention to what mode you're on. But for our purposes, we're going to be in radians forever. So I'll show you how to do that. You just hit mode, and then second one down is radians. It should look just like mine. So now that we're sure we're on the correct mode, I'm going to show you where the derivative button is. There's no actual derivative button. It is in the math menu, which you may be familiar with because some useful fractions functions live there. It's math 8, so I'll show you what that looks like. So I've already done a little bit of messing around with this here. So you're going to hit math, and then either hit the A key or scroll down so you can see what it looks like here, and derivative. Okay, so this is what the derivative looks like. So I'll give you a really simple example. What we're going to do is we're going to type a function inside the parentheses. This first box tells us which variable we're looking at, and this last box tells us which value of that variable we're looking at. For our purposes in AP Calc and in Calc 1, it's always going to be x, right? So you're always differentiating with respect to the same variable. So just hit x there, and then we'll put in a function. I'm just going to use x squared. So the derivative of x squared is 2x. Let's say I want to know what the derivative is at x equals 5. So I type that in there. I hit enter. Okay. Makes sense, right? Because if the derivative of x squared is 2x, that derivative is going to be valued at 10 at x equals 5. So that's the derivative button. And obviously we wouldn't really want to use this for a function this simple because we could do that in our head, right? But when we get to functions that look like our example here, that's going to be super useful. Okay. So you can take a second, make sure you can find that function, and then I'm going to show you the smart way to use that for a problem like this. So what I've done is I've typed our function exactly as we see it into the graphing window now. Okay. Now what you could do is do exactly what I just did with x squared and type it in and plug in 2 and get the derivative. But this is going to be useful to us because we are going to have to use this function again in this problem, right? So if we can avoid typing it in more than once, we should do that, especially because this one has, many opportunities where you might type it in incorrectly. So type it in once here, double check that it's correct. Be generous with your parentheses because remember your calculator is not always great about order of operations. And then we're going to move on to our next step. So we do not have to graph this. What this does is we've saved this function in the calculator so we don't have to type it again. So now I'll show you how to get this function back in that derivative operator. So I'm going to get out of here, so I quit, and then I'm going to go math and 8 to get the derivative operator again. We're still differentiating with respect to x. Now in here, instead of typing this all in, we've already done that. You're going to hit alpha trace. And notice this gives you a list of all of the y variables. So it lets you pick something that you've typed in. Oops. It lets you pick something that you've typed in on this graph screen, which is cool. So again, it's alpha trace, and then you're going to pick the y value where you typed it in. So y1, we've saved this function here. So we're taking the derivative of this function we've saved, and then notice we want when x equals 2. So I'm going to type that in here, and this is my result. So this is my derivative at x equals 2. So I'm going to record that, and notice the problem says round all decimals to 3 decimal places. The reason that Delta Math says that is because that's also the rule in the AP exam. They want 3 decimal places, and you have to round accurately to 3 decimal places. So 1.7450, if you for some reason rounded this up, I don't think you would, but if you rounded it to 456, you would not get the point there. Okay, so I'm going to capture this, and all you have to write, let's say this is an FRQ, all you have to write is something like f prime of 2 equals 1.745. Okay? So they're assuming that you've done a derivative like this on your calculator. You don't have to show any work for that because they know that your calculator can do this, and they're more interested in your reasoning more than can you grind out this derivative algebraically. Okay? Now, what we're looking for is the equation of the tangent line. So for these particular problems, you'll use point slope form because it's easier. And we already have most of what we need. So the result here would be y minus f of 2, right, equals my slope now, 1.745, times x minus x1. Well, x1 is 2. Okay, so we just need a y value. Y value is going to be at plain old f of 2. So this is why we saved this function in our calculator, because now we can easily evaluate that on our calculator without having to retype it all. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. I think it's just easiest to go to y equals and then check out your graph and then go second calc value and then plug in 2. And my y is 12.794, and we're going to round up to 795, and we're going to give 3 decimal places. So y equals 12.795, we're going to write that here. And that's it. So that's the solution. So pretty easy to do these on your calculator. You're going to get really fast at that too, to where this will be definitely more efficient than trying to calculate this derivative by hand. When I gave you the finding derivatives or finding tangent lines at trig functions, and we got a little bogged down in that as a class, knowing how to do this would have been super useful and would move things along, right? So let's summarize the steps here. I'm going to make sure that you got it. Make sure you can reproduce this result too on your calculator before you move on. That's a good way to practice it and make sure you know what you're doing before you try some on your own. And here are my concise directions. So you're going to type your function into the grapher, math 8 to get the derivative operator. So everything I'm highlighting is the buttons. You're going to enter x to start, and then you're going to hit alpha trace to get that list y1, y2, y3, etc. And then you're going to choose that variable where you stored the function, probably y1, and then you're going to enter your x value. So make sure you know all these buttons. If you're not sure what I'm talking about as I run through these steps, it would be a good idea to go back and rewatch the video before you move on.